Well, hi everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We have a full house here. Lindsey Guile has been my colleague here at Artist Community College for 10 years. This is your first solo show here on campus. I saw the show last year. And we're so excited at Duchess to host this fabulous work, which looks amazing in this space. Lindsey got her MFA from SUNY New Paltz and her BFA and MA from SUNY Oswego. So you are a SUNY person.
State school representative.
The great talent that we have here at SUNY. Sometimes I think we're not so good at tuning our horns at the State University here. We are the largest university in one state, right? Sometimes I think we forget how fabulous we are. And now, speaking of fabulous, I'd like to introduce Lindsey Guile.
Hi guys. First of all, as you can tell, I've been losing my voice the last couple of days. So let me know if you can't understand what I'm saying. There was lots of humidifiers and things. I almost gargled salt water, but there are just things one does not do unless they're forced. But this morning I had no voice, and the fact that I have this, I'm really happy with. And I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. Thank you so much for coming. I know our schedules are really busy. When I first thought of the title for this show, and titling shows is one of the hardest things I have to do aside from titling pieces. I kind of hate doing all of it. I'll make it till the cows come home. But you want to try to find something that accurately represents the work that's in front of you. And when I thought about the word indelible, it's not just the permanent marks like on our bodies, like this drawing that is tattooed, but it are the words that are said to us, the image that is, the messages that are sent to us that forever impact how we see ourselves when we look in the mirror, when we go about everyday life. And those messages can be uplifting, or those messages can be damaging. And what you have around you are stories of all of that. And it's a great honor for me to be able to draw these folks that I work with. And sometimes it's a very daunting honor because you're carrying the stories of love, of pain, of deep hurt, of reclamation, of power, and people finding themselves and becoming the person they always wanted to be, whether they are 25 years old or they're like in their 70s. So when I make this work, and first of all, I guess I've been doing this work a little bit for the past 10 years. I started work like this when I was in graduate school, but it was work that was not well received, so I didn't continue on with the work. And it took about 5 years after for me to kind of get my confidence back in making this kind of work because of what I went through there. And I'm glad I didn't listen to them. So some of my students are always like, I was telling you, like, you're not making work for me. It's not about what I like. That's why. Because people pushed their likes on me. And it made me not make the work that was authentic to what I wanted to say. And it took a long time for me to find that voice back. I started making the work regularly in about 2018, late 2018 and into 2019. And I find a lot of my models through friends, friends of friends, and even strangers over social media. And then they come here to the college, and I photograph them in the drawing studio. And the first thing I say is, tell me the story about your body. What are those things in your life that have shaped how you see yourself? It's very important to note that when I work with all of these models, that it is an atmosphere wholly based on consent. They do not have to be nude. In fact, I'm getting ready to work on a drawing of a model who stayed fully clothed because that's what they were comfortable with. Some of them will say, I'm okay being nude, but I don't want you to see the front of my pelvis. And I'm like, that's fine. I will take all of that into consideration. I will never violate that trust that they're giving to me. And anything I tell you today about what they might have said, something they've told me it's okay to say. There's plenty that they didn't give consent for me to say. So in many ways, in the studio, when I photograph them, it is kind of like art therapy. But my goal with this work is to hopefully have them come to a show like this and look at themselves and see themselves in a different way, hopefully a more positive way. And when you come in here, maybe that drawing isn't you, but maybe you see something that resembles you and you find a new appreciation for something maybe you didn't have before. And this actually started with the first time I drew myself nude. In graduate school, I was dealing with an eating disorder, and I was trying to figure out how to deal with it, how to pass my classes, how to not let it overcome my life. And I remember someone saying, "Why don't you draw yourself nude?" And my first thought was, well, no one wants to see me nude. Right? And then they were like, "Oh, that's why you need to do it." And I was like, "Why are you right? I'm very uncomfortable right now." There's lots of jokes. And I drew myself from collarbone to thigh, and there was lots of crying when I did it. And then people started coming in my studio and they were like, "Oh my gosh, look how beautifully this is drawn, look how beautiful this person is." They didn't know it was me. Look at the draping on the stomach from weight fluctuations. I remember one of my friends coming in going, "She's got nice boobs." I was like, "Hell yeah, she's got nice boobs," right? But a lot of the things that made me horribly insecure, all of a sudden, through the vision of art, through this lens of art, through the hierarchy of art, became something else. And bodies or figures, I gotta stop saying bodies, it sounds like I have a suspicious backyard. Through these figures, I think we start to see people in a new way. So it's playing a bit on that, like, again, the hierarchy of how we see things. And also, unfortunately, still within art, there's a lot more normalization of all body types, but it still has a lot of ways to go. There are still very sexualized figures, very photoshopped figures, very much the beauty mainstream. And I try really hard when I work with models to show the beautiful diversity that we have around us. So I started doing that work, and then I sent out a call on social media for mostly those born female to send me pictures from collarbone to thigh. And they did, and I did a series of drawings. And so when I came back to this work in 2018, I used the same method, because I think people are eager to tell their stories, they're eager to see themselves represented. So again, when they come in and they model, I really just want them to be themselves. I don't want posing, it's not a fashion shoot. And it's about saying, like, here I am, I'm allowed to take up this space unapologetically. And some people are nervous, some people are very tentative, some people are incredibly comfortable. And I work with that. So as I photograph them, I talk with them, and to try to make it more comfortable for them, because let alone being nude or semi-nude in a place, you're also having someone pick up a camera. And we all have the angles we know we look best at. Can you imagine someone sitting on the studio floor, which is what I do, and photographing you from perhaps the angles you don't love? And so that's done very deliberately on my part, because every one of these figures I photograph them down below, so that when you're in here, they're looking down on you. Maybe not in a judgmental way, but they're allowed to exist in the space. So it's a very subtle aesthetic trick that I do to empower them. And I actually kind of really love when it makes people uncomfortable when I hear about it. I'm like, haha, I'm doing my job, right? So I usually photograph for about an hour. And some of my students yesterday were asking, like, well, how do you have them pose? And I said, I really just asked them, like, how do you stand when you're comfortable? How are you when you're you? Some of them were like, well, I curl up into a little ball. I'm like, curl up into a little ball. That's fine. And the more we talk, the more we work together, they relax. Probably one of my favorite photo shoots was actually with this model here, one that has her hands on her neck. She had modeled for me once previously, and she got hold of me and said, Lindsay, I want to do another photo shoot. And I was like, okay. I'm always up to take more photos. And when she came in, she was like, I know what your project is all about. I don't want to talk. I was like, oh, okay. She was like, just have emotions I need to get out, and I know you're a safe person to capture them. So it was about 10 minutes where she just moved, and like the emotion radiated out of her. And at one point she did this, where she just pulled her hands right down her body, like she was trying to pull something out of herself in a way. And then right after this, she broke down in tears. And I actually put my camera down. She goes, you can take pictures of this. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not here to exploit your pain. I can capture parts of it, but I'm not laid it on the podium in front of me. I'm not comfortable capturing that. That moment is for you. There's times when there's so much joy. There's a picture in the back, the farthest one against the right wall. That piece is called Joyous. And she came in and she's a fat babe, and I know she's okay with that term. To me, fat is just a word, it's a descriptor, it's not an F word. But she came in and she was like, I love who I am. I want to show people they can love who they are. And I captured this photo and she was just like feeling that moment within herself. Very similar with that one as well, the dark one in the middle with the black background. And I loved seeing that joy, especially as a fat person, because oftentimes people think we're pathetic and lack self-control and really don't add much value to a space. Initially, a lot of my work centered in understanding where we are as fat people in contemporary culture. What are those things what are those issues that we face? Like, I do a lot of research, not as much as I should be lately, but reading people like Virginia Smith and Kate Mann and Aubrey Gordon, and looking at how fat people are denied medical care. Like, we're not given adequate medical care because they just think all we need to do is lose weight, and the stigma around that. There's a drawing that's not in the show, because it got torn at my last show. That's okay. And that model talked with me at Garrison Art Center last year, and she talked heavily about medical malpractice that she's faced as a large woman. But through this work that started looking at fatness, I started seeing the stories of everyone else. So even though my focus tended to be in one area, it really widened. I wanted to tell stories of everyone, because everyone is facing something that we don't know much about. They keep it locked in. The drawing over here, my series is called Unapologetic, and that drawing is called Unapologetic. I waited a long time to find a piece that really held that title for me, and this was a young woman who actually moved from here, who had faced insurmountable odds in her life, and just is always just like, here I am, take me or leave me. And she's incredible. She is. I said, she is. I just don't see her anymore. She moved to the West Coast. And when she came in, and she just was like, I want people to just understand this is who I am, and that I'm not going to make myself any less for anyone else. And I was like, yeah, girl. So when I often find the poses for the pictures to draw, I try to find something that strikes me about our conversations. What was that quintessential moment, so that I can bring that feeling out? What is that power that you're feeling? And it's actually interesting because the model of that drawing there, I did an initial drawing of her that was medium-sized. For me, medium-sized is this big, by the way. And she was very tentative at the beginning of the shoot. And I finished this right before the exhibit. And I was like, I feel like I didn't quite do her justice. And I was going through my photos again. And I found this, and I was like, there we go. That's that joy that she had later on. One of the other drawings, I'm really, it's actually a new one. By the way, the majority of these drawings I've done in the last year. I've done about 10 brand new drawings since my solo show at Garrison Art Center. The drawing back here, which you probably can't quite see, this is of a very dear friend of mine. I grew up with her. I've known her for almost 35 years. And last year when she was visiting, she was like, you still doing photos? And I was like, yeah. She goes, camera charged? I'm like, yeah. We can do photos, Merle, if we do them right now. I was like, oh, okay. And I was really interested because this is someone I've known so long, but she has polycystic ovarian syndrome. If you guys are familiar with what that is, but it's an overproduction of testosterone in the body. And in her, it takes shape very physically with narrow hips, wide shoulders, the shape of her breasts. And it has shaped a good portion of her life. It also leads with infertility. And it was very difficult for her to have children. It took her 6 years to have a child. And then she had to have a C-section. And I remember her telling me, like, I didn't feel quite like a mother because I didn't give birth vaginally. And I think it took a long time for her to be able to overcome. And she's like, I really want to be a drawing so that if other folks come in and they see a body like theirs on the wall, they'll know that they're not alone. And I was like, get it, right? That's kind of the whole goal of what I do here. It was actually also very interesting when I was picking photos of her. It was hard because I've known her my whole life. And I was like, oh, this one's very her. And I was like, oh, but this one's her narrative. I had to like be careful. I'm like, I can show I love her anyway, but I wanted to make sure it fit her story. And in many ways, I become a storyteller, which is interesting because there's no words, right? Every one of you can come in here and find your own narrative with the pieces. It's not so important that there is a full narrative for me, but that you see or you feel what they felt working in the sessions. Also, one of the big changes in this last year for me in doing this work is a couple of my models came out as non-binary. So the model right behind me, the really big one. So I had to change my artist statement, and I had to change the way I do a talk. A lot of times I just used women, and not everyone here is a woman. And I honor everyone's gender identity. And so making sure that I updated these things to be inclusive of everyone that I've worked with was really important to me, because I have to honor who they are now as much as I can. And I'm really proud that I'm able to do that. And I actually had recently had a conversation with with them to make sure that I was using the appropriate language to make them feel as seen as possible. So when I do these drawings, first of all, they're not bigger because that's how high my ceiling is, to be honest. Also, anytime I have to get up high on a stool or a chair to draw, I go live on Instagram, so in case I fall, someone can call 911. I'm a little klutzy. I hope my neighbors downstairs would hear the thud, but you never know. So little technical aspects about the work. I work this large because I enjoy it. Also because you kind of can't ignore it. But if I could work bigger, I would. I'd love to find a studio at some point. And it always comes up, why don't I paint? The simple answer is I don't want to. Really, that's it. Why do people not ask painters why they don't draw? It never happens the other way around. Right, you feeling me here? Right? I've always loved charcoal. I'm very influenced by classical, like Renaissance sculpture, like love me a Michelangelo, Donatello's Mary Magdalene out of wood is like beautiful. But I've always been in awe of sculptors, and that was probably one of my earliest imprints of beautiful art. I was fortunate enough in 2001 to study in Florence through a program at my community college. And I also had a great class in undergrad called Women in Early Film, and to see how much work that they could do in a black and white film to create this beautiful story and the drama just through lighting is why I love charcoal. I also just love the medium of it. I feel like it's very expressive. And also, work doesn't always have to yell. There can be quiet power. And I think in many ways, this is a quiet power. Some of you might be like, I don't know, it's yelling a lot. Color yells differently. So at my heart, I've always been a drawer. And also I have cats. So in my house, oil paint is also not good for the cats. If anyone keeps pushing me, I'm like, guys, I got cats. I'm like, okay, we'll leave you alone. Solvents are good for cats. When I'm working on these, though, I work on about 3 at a time because that's how many fit on my walls. I'm pretty open about the fact that I have ADHD. So sometimes that transforms into an artistic superpower. Sometimes it's one that really makes me really tired. I like to work on multiple things at once, so my attention jumps around. And a professor years ago said you need to work on more than one thing at one time, and I was like, you crazy, bro. But he was right. That was long before my diagnosis from last year. But I also do sculpture work. I dabble in some printmaking. I do some painting as well, but mostly just landscapes because it's fun to go out with my friends. And it always helps me to create, to make, I'm realizing within the last year, the more I make, the more I draw, if that makes sense. If I'm feeling a little stressed, I'll go to the clay studio and I'll make some teacups and I'll put salty words on them. If I'm needing company, I'll go paint with my friends out in a landscape in the Hudson Valley. But for a long time, when I got out of school, it was like, I can't make big drawings, I'm not gonna draw, I'll show them. I only showed myself up by not doing any work. But it keeps me going, keeps me moving. A lot of the work I do happens at night. That's just weirdly when I get energy. And a lot of people ask and say, is this from life? No. I wish it could be. I don't make that kind of money to be able to pay models for, like in this case, probably around 65 or 70 hours to do that drawing. But the models who do work with me, I do give them drawings of our session together. So the small drawings that you see that are behind you and on the back of this wall are their gifts for working with me. Some people were asking the other day, well, why don't you pay them? I said I would if they asked, but and I have once. My concern is that with the idea of paying, that I don't want people feeling like they have to do that because that's their only choice, if that makes sense. Like we need to get groceries, so I'm gonna model nude for you. So it's an area I find a little fuzzy that I do my best to navigate, but it is always an option within creating the work if they want financial compensation from there. Trying to think. Sorry, I'm okay. I still have a voice. I'm excited. A little off my game because of feeling a little off. I was really lucky in 2001 that I got a residency at the Blue Mountain Center in the Adirondacks. So I was able to spend an entire month there just creating in a cloud of charcoal, like Pig Pen in Charlie Brown. And it's where a lot of the pieces were actually made. And I was able to photograph a lot of people as well. I was fortunate in that experience because one of my earliest solo exhibitions, a friend of mine came up and said, can I give you criticism about your work? And I said, absolutely. And she was like, you don't have enough diversity in your work. Of the models that you're working with, I see Maka just was like, yes. And they were very correct. And to my answer to that, when I talk to people, is this, I can understand why many people of color are leery about letting a white person tell their story. And I'm certainly not going to be like, hi, you're my token brown friend, can I draw you? Right? That would be very wrong. But when I was at my residency, it was a very diverse residency, and with giving my presentation, the folks that were there were like, we know what you're doing, we understand where you're coming from, we would love for you to draw us and for you to share our stories. So I'm really thankful to them. And it was very legitimate criticism, and one that I took to heart and continue to try to do better on. Because I think that there's things that we can always do better with, and keep growing within that work. Sorry, a little something in my eye there. So, in terms of how often a lot of the work takes me, it's probably about 25 to 35 hours per piece. I couldn't tell you exactly because I work on more than one at one time. But it's usually quite fun. If I get frustrated on one, I can work on another. And there are some days where I just walk in my studio and I'm like, nope, I'm not gonna do this today, I don't have it in me. But sometimes you just make it happen. And I'm continuously inspired by the people that I work with to keep making this kind of work and to see where it goes, how it's going to change. I have an image that I currently love, and it is of this model and another friend of theirs who are all heavily tattooed, and they came in together to do a photo shoot. They're very good friends. And they stood together hand in hand and looked down at me, and I took a photo, and it really was this empowering image of the power of like close friendships and love and family. And I'd like to do that drawing, but it needs to be like the size of that wall. And I don't think they'd let me have the gallery for the summer to make a mess in and do a big ass drawing. Maybe, Dana. Just kidding.
That's a pretty darn good idea.
I would make a horrible mess.
Well, I think you can use drawing
You probably could, yeah. See, look at me weasel things out here in public.
And then we'll clean it up at the end of the summer. We have time.
Yeah, it's all good. Kristen's crying over here. Kristen was our amazing tech, and she's like, oh, no. No, I've seen my studio flourish.
For you, yes. For you, yes.
You're so sweet. It's okay if you take that back later. But, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm babbling for a second. Like I said, I feel a little off my game. But I'm happy to take some questions, and then I can kind of expand upon things. Oh, Dana's already got her hand up.
So, do you start with a black and white photograph, and how big do you blow it up?
So I work with a color photograph, actually. I don't usually turn them black and white, partially because I think when you turn them black and white, you lose a lot of dimension that's provided by the color reference. When I'm drawing, actually, for those who are art students or have a keen eye, I use warm and cool charcoal. So to give a little bit of temperature depth in the pieces. So I think when the dark background has a very cold charcoal in there, and I'll use Conte crayons in the darkest areas because the cooler is going to get darker. So I work from the color photograph. I do often draw from my laptop. I also will print out the images for my students who are like, really, you make us print our stuff out. So that in case my laptop is dead, I have the reference as well. And in terms of the size, I'm really open that I do this. I do project the images because they are so large and define the composition the way I want it. I use a projector. There is a big difference because I know my drawing students are like, when can I use a projector? No, you can't. Never. Okay? It's a tool, it's not a crutch for me. So I'll do a very loose, quick drawing, and then I actually spend quite a bit of time going through and remeasuring and making sure things are correct. So I use that to get the composition. It's rather hilarious to cut pieces of paper this size by yourself in your studio. And sometimes I forget to close the door so the cats are like, what are you doing? Can we help? Yeah, it's, I guess. And I'm like, I think this is 7.5 feet. Some of the shorter pieces are because I have an outlet under one of my spots. Like, we gotta work around things. But yeah, so that's kind of how I find the composition. And I spend a lot of time planning it out, playing around with different images to see what I like. Did that answer, Dana? Yeah. Kristen?
I have a question about self-portraiture, because you mentioned the collarbone head drawing you did in school. What does it mean for you to push the whole body, your whole body out on paper? And did it take a while for you to get to that point to be ready to do that?
Yeah. When I first did that portrait, my education as a figurative artist rarely included someone who had a body like mine. In fact, I only remember one model, and she was phenomenal. She inspired me so much. But the professor actually didn't like her. He said she couldn't hold a pose, which I kept working with her beyond that. So I kind of internalized a lot of shame, like I'd always wanted to model, but I felt like I just couldn't. And after I did that first portrait, I've done 2 large self-portraits since then. I did one in 2019 and then one in 2023. And if it doesn't squeeze you out at all or anything, the one on the end back there is me. It's daunting because I'm human, right? The idea of self-confidence and self-worth isn't just like this, and then you're like, I'm awesome all the time. It goes like this. So I think for me, coming out of the pandemic and the stress that I went through and the effect it had on my body and my mental health diagnoses, and honestly I had a breakdown, very close to a pretty bad breakdown last year. I wanted to see myself in a different way, but I also have gotten tattoos. So it was actually funny yesterday, one of my students, when we were up here, they were like, that person has the same tattoo as you, and I was like, it's because it's me, right? It can be hard to see, but it can also be beautiful, and there's, like, I almost didn't put that piece in here, because I was like, what if students are like, oh my God, my teacher put a 7.5 foot nude of herself in the art gallery, that's really embarrassing. But it's not the first time. Actually, I've done 3 big ones, I forgot. The very first one I did big in grad school, it was of me, because I'm the cheapest model I've got to. I'm always available. Actually, the first piece that I did was like this, and it was straight on, and it was like this hug to myself. And I remember being in graduate school, and my professor going, well, she just looks like she's ashamed of herself, that she's embarrassed and she needs to lose weight. And it was literally a hug. It was this. And I was like, I feel like you're projecting onto this figure. I don't think they knew it was me. So when I did this drawing, I wanted it to be the hug again, but from a different angle. Something less flattering than more straight on. And I think that's the thing I focus on the most, because there's been a lot of accepting who I am in this process, and I'm really inspired by everyone that I draw. And honestly, this is a little sappy, I'm inspired a lot by my students who live authentically who they are, and I get to see that every day. And I'm like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it, right? When I came out as bisexual, it was because a bunch of my students were like, hell yeah, we're queer. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm queer too, right? So it's complex, but I hope they'll do it like every 5 years or so. It makes my mom uncomfortable if she watches this Hannah. And then she'll message me and be like, it doesn't make me uncomfortable. Yes, it does. But does that answer okay, Krista?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? Lemon?
You mentioned that when you first started the project, it wasn't well received. Could you? Can you expand on that? Why? Who wasn't receiving it well, or why?
It really was my professors, actually. They were never able to really articulate why. Which is also why I tell my students, if someone can't articulate to you why the work isn't working and they just say no, don't listen to them. You get to learn from my trauma here, people. Honestly, I think there's a healthy dose of fat phobia in there for them. I was working with large models at the time. I also think there was a bias against drawing, which I felt like in the program. And maybe I think too, because when I did graduate school, I was in my early 30s, and I had been teaching actually for years before that. So I came in and I knew what I wanted to do, and I wasn't maybe as teachable as perhaps an undergrad student was. In fact, I know that some of it because people talk, people hear. I'd always been someone who really overvalued the views of my professors, and I wanted to make them happy. I wanted to show that I was teachable, that I was here to learn. And it really was just sacrificing the work that I wanted to make. I wasn't very good with setting boundaries on that and saying, no, you're gonna listen, this is authentic to me. But there really was never like a clear discussion. I was told the drawings were bad. I remember being in there with one of my professors like, these are bad, they're just not good. And that was really all I got. So I wish I could give you a better answer to that. And they were like, you can't show these, come up with a new thesis in a month. And I did. So, which was photography, by the way. I have an MFA in drawing, but I did photography. But, yeah. Carl?
Yeah, so I know we talked about this at the beginning, it would be an interesting conversation to have for you. Could you expand upon why you choose to not have a background or have this figures solidly in the space without environment?
This is something that always comes up. Even my students yesterday were like, well, what about just like where they're seated on something? And I think it's for like moments like this when they're in a gallery and they're just on a white wall and there's nothing else to change the elements of the space that they're in on this white wall. And they're able to just take up the space. I've also thought about maybe I could cut them out and mount them or something, but I don't have that kind of space in my house. Yeah, it's just I don't feel like a background or space is relevant at this point in time. And that there's nothing kind of holding them in on the page that any moment they look like they could burst out. With the images that have a different tone background, like this one is toned gray. Now there's several that are black. A lot of times those are just like aesthetic decisions, and I wish there was a little bit more behind it. But like this piece, there's a beautiful glow on the hair and the shoulder, and I was like, well, we gotta keep that. So sometimes it is just a formal option. I will say that the pieces with the covered in charcoal are significantly harder to handle because the charcoal still comes off. So the drawings actually need a little bit of maintenance when I put them up and things like that. A lot of people say we'll do spray fixative on them. I use hairspray. Actually, I just discovered a workable fixative called Guile workable fixative. A friend got it for me for Christmas. And that is pretty good, so I'll keep using that. But workable fixatives actually, to me, destroy the delicate values that you get in a charcoal drawing. And it's not worth it. I usually cover them with clean paper, or when I pack these away, I'm going to cover them with glassine, which is an archival sheet that we can put over top when I roll them up. So I hope that was a good, satisfactory answer. And I've gotten more and more people who are like coming in like with their jewelry on, like with their makeup, with, you know, really letting it be who they are, and I've enjoyed that a lot. I found it really fun, like drawing a bra. I'm like, ooh, this texture's fun to draw. Like I'm kind of a little bit of a nerd in that way. But yeah. When I first started drawing tattoos, let me tell you, this one, I was like, how am I going to do this? There's so many tattoos. This is the third tattooed person I drew. And I freaked myself out for months until I finally was like, I just got to do it. But the first person I drew with tattoos, I was really inspired to work with her because she is, like me, also a fat person. And I had only met her once briefly before, and she came in and we were talking about her tattoos, and she was like, I knew people were going to look at me, so I might as well give them something to look at. And I was like, get it, girl. And that was really empowering to me because it's something I'd always wanted to do. And then I went and I started getting tattoos. And I started to feel like myself. Like I just got a shoulder piece. And I remember looking in the mirror going, hell yeah, look at me go. Like I remember I went and got my nose ring. Like for a long time, like I remember I'm a blonde naturally. I don't feel like a blonde, I don't like being a blonde. I like red, or purple or green, whatever. And it's like, what are these steps that we take to become ourselves? And sometimes those things are permanent. Sometimes they're body modifications. Sometimes becoming yourself means having children, right? And carrying another life. And what happens when we start letting go of societal expectations? When we just start enjoying who we are. And I do tend to stay away from the term body positive. I think that it is a term that has been co-opted by thin influencers, and it can be really toxic. So I use body liberation. Okay? Is anyone here ever wholly happy with their body 100% of the time? Okay, good. I mean, not good, but like, but what? Or those days when you feel neutral, those days when it's like, I can't really love myself today, but I'm going to make active decisions to not harm myself. That's what I had to do. I said, not going to harm myself today. And to me, that's body liberation. Like when you get up and you like put on an outfit, you thought you looked cute, and you're like, oh no. And you have to say to yourself, like, okay, that's just how I'm seeing myself today. I'm gonna put something else on. That's just society, and then I'm gonna not put it on tomorrow, and I'll be like, hell yeah, that looks good today, right? But it's also knowing how to advocate for your body in places that you belong there, wherever that might be. And like I mentioned before, there's a bunch of amazing writers and contemporary philosophers writing about body liberation, and artists making work about art, or about fat art, or different kinds of liberation beyond the expected beauty standards. I always get, do you know Jenny Saville? I'm like, yes, I know Jenny Saville. I like Jenny Saville's work. She's great. She's also a thin woman who photographs people from unflattering angles. I'm gonna get hate mail for this if we post this online. And makes people look fat. And it's starting to rub me the wrong way. I'm like, you're not telling an authentic story here. Let's talk about fat creators. Let's uplift creators of color, queer creators who are making work about themselves and their communities. So there's that in there, and I try to find folks who do that. And as I say that, I totally forgot to make my list, which I was going to make a list on. But I really like Karen Turner, who's a British artist, a fat figurative artist. People like Mildred I, who's doing a lot of portraits in masculinity. Oh my goodness. There's a woman named Sophia. I forget her last name on Instagram. She's Sophia Creates. She talks about being fat, but also dealing with a history of family trauma. And there's so much more. I can make a list and post it to my Instagram. I'm sorry I kind of dropped the ball on that. I was just had my head over a steam machine this morning, so I could talk to you today. But what other questions? Anything? I will answer pretty much anything. I'm an open book. Go ahead.
I had a question about the title. I think you might have touched on it before, but why did you choose Indelible?
Yeah, so the idea of indelible for me was this idea of the words that stay with us that people say, both positive and negative, and the aspects of our culture, the messages that we receive that become so permanent. I remember, unfortunately, I'm also someone who remembers a lot of the bad things that are said to me. So I can remember years ago, a woman in my grad program, and I was significantly smaller than I am now because I was still in an eating disorder, and she goes, you know, you'd be pretty if you lost 70 pounds. And I was like, and I just kind of walked away, and she said it again to me like 2 weeks later, and I was like, where do you get off? Where do you get off? She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, yeah, you better be. But, you know, you get these messages from your family. I've never been small. Okay, I was born at like 4 pounds, but like I was a tiny potato because I was born 6 weeks early. Okay? But other than that, I've never been a tiny person, but throughout my entire life, coaches, my family, it was like, you can become smaller. You can diminish yourself into this perfect view of femininity. I am almost 6 feet tall. Short of chopping me off at the knees, I'm never going to fit that. I'm also a larger person genetically. And additionally, because of my medication for my mental health, which I like being mentally healthy. I think that's pretty cool. But I'm sure every single one here, regardless of your gender, by the way, has those messages, right, that you've been told. And that's why I chose Indelible. Because like, how do we get them to go away? I wish I could tell you fully. I will give a shout out to my amazing therapist, Michelle, because she's helping me work on it. And also a question I get often is, why don't I do drawings of men, cisgendered men, those born male? And I think when we talk about body image and masculinity, it's a very different conversation from when we look at femininity. And it's just not one that I think I'm the right person to tell, that I'm equipped to tell. But I'm hoping maybe work like this can inspire folks to say, you know what, I want to look at this from my point of view, from my life experience. And then maybe we can have a show together at some point. So if you know of anybody, call me. Yeah, Dana.
I just heard yesterday, I was meeting with another artist who wants to show here, and he asked me if I knew the person who ran the gallery at Marist. And he said that it's an art professor at Marist that does a lot of nude male body art. So yeah, maybe we should track him down.
Get his name for me.
I'm gonna snoop on I'm gonna try to find it out today.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
And I will also say too that a lot of these are overtly sexual. It's very important for me to not have sexualized images here, partially because that's so prevalent, and I want people to not to be objectified. However, I have someone who wants to work with me from a friend of mine from Ithaca, and they are a burlesque dancer. So I'm actually looking forward to the challenge because they have such an inherent sensuality about them. And it's probably something I'm not super comfortable with, so I like getting out of my comfort zone and seeing what happens. So, other questions, anything else? Mehmet.
When you're working with your subjects, when you're photographing them, what's the dynamic? Is it free-flowing photography? Are you constantly talking to them, or how does that work?
Aside from the one time when this model said, let's not talk, we're usually chatting. I found that works a lot better in terms of them feeling natural in front of the camera. So it's often an exchange as well. When they're telling me their story, if I have something that I can relate to, I ask them if it's okay for me to share. And because I want to respect their boundaries and what they're comfortable with in terms of knowing about me. but I find that that equal give and take makes them more comfortable in front of the camera. And also, if they seem like really upset about something, I'm like, you don't have to tell me, it's okay. Because I also understand that some people might have something heavy in their story that they're just not there to share. And I don't ever want them to in the sharing, put them in a place that's dangerous for them or difficult for them without proper support. So I will say that as well if I feel like it's getting to that point. But yeah, we talk, and I usually roll around on a rolly stool, lowered all the way down so I can spin around them. Sometimes they'll do something like, ooh, hold that for a second. And they'll be like, okay, just look slightly this way with your eyes. So it is a little bit of different guidance. It's funny, in the beginning, he's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, just shake it out. So, I'll be like, how do you sit when you watch TV, or how do you stand when you're hanging with your friends? And it's always like, well, I stand like this. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. And there's often concern about well, will you get a good image? I was like, I'm gonna take 300 to 400 images. We're fine. Right? There's a lot of concern about them doing a good enough job for me. And I'm like, do not worry about it. It's going to be amazing no matter what. So, and I have had, if anyone has had a negative experience, they've never shared it with me. Everyone said this was actually really uplifting and helpful. And this was actually the first show where a lot of models were able to come and see their drawings. So I know some of you, when you were at the opening, this model came and a couple people were like, is that the model? I'm like, yeah, that's the model. And this model is here, and actually this model is coming this weekend. So she's really excited. This is her first two-person portrait with her son and her stomach, her uterus, I guess. I think that anatomically correct. I think that for me, if people came up and said, Lindsay, I don't like your work, I'd be like, okay, you don't have to. And that's big for me. But for people, if people say, well, who do you want to enjoy your work? And I said, if it's just the models, I've done my job. Because I want them to feel empowered by the work that I've created. And I've had some really beautiful reactions. A piece that's not in the show, I had a small show at Art Central here in Poughkeepsie. One of the models came early, and I was like, what do you think? And she started to cry, and I was like, you okay? And she's like, you made me look beautiful. And I said, I didn't create anything that wasn't already there. And that was the crux of everything. That she felt beautiful or empowered. That's what's most important to me. And actually, just thinking of something off that, and being a very classically trained drawer, often the critique I got in graduate school was, you can draw, but what else can you do? It's classical, it's not contemporary. So for me, it was about finding a contemporary theme that suited my classical skill set. And in order to keep up with that skill set, I draw from life all the time. So I go to open figure drawings, I go to the Woodstock School of Art and do the drawing marathons. So keeping my skills fresh is really important. I also, teaching the Drawing 2 class here, which is our left-hand class, helps a lot with that. But if you're going to work from photograph, you want to be careful because the photograph flattens everything out. So for me, keeping with the models from life helps me make sure that these photos look like they're drawn from life as well. I'm a big proponent for drawing from life. A little biased, but anything else? Okay, thank you guys so much.